I never thought a simple apartment could change my life, or almost take it. But there's something about this story that I can't keep to myself. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe for more terrifying stories, because after you hear this, you're going to want to stay close. Trust me, the things that lurk in the dark are always watching. I never imagined I'd end up living alone in a creaky old apartment, but life has a way of pushing you into strange corners. My name is Emily Carter, 30, single, and trying to restart my life after a messy breakup and a job layoff all within the same month. I used to work in marketing for a mid-level agency, and for a while, everything felt stable. But stability, I've learned, is fragile. After everything unraveled, I knew I needed a fresh start. I packed what little I had left, drained my savings, and started apartment hunting. The city wasn't kind to people in my financial situation, and most of the places I toured felt like overpriced shoeboxes with peeling wallpaper. I was about to give up when I stumbled across an online listing for a spacious one-bedroom apartment in an older building. The rent was suspiciously low, almost too good to be true, but desperation has a way of quieting those little alarm bells in your head. When I first moved into the apartment, I thought I had stumbled upon a miracle. The rent was suspiciously low for the area, and the unit itself was surprisingly spacious. Sure, it had quirks. The groaning pipes that carried a sound like distant wailing, the creaky wooden floors that seemed to sigh underfoot, and the faint sour smell of something old and damp lingering in the corners. But I was willing to overlook them. The landlord was an unsettling man, wiry and hunched, with skin like old parchment stretched too thin over sharp bones. His watery, unfocused eyes barely met mine as he handed me the keys. "It's an old building," he said slowly, his voice cracked like splintered glass. "Some things here don't quite add up. Best not to dwell on them." I had laughed it off at the time. Don't worry, I'm not picky. But on my first night, I noticed the window. It was set into the hallway wall just before the bedroom door. Narrow, tall, and disturbingly coffin-shaped, the glass was thick and grimy, warped in places as though it had melted slightly and then refrozen into twisted patterns. No light seeped through it, no street lamps, no faint glow from passing cars, just a void of pure, inky blackness. The longer I stared into it, the more it felt like the darkness was staring back. I rationalized it. Maybe it was a design flaw or an architectural oddity, an old ventilation shaft covered up years ago. But even as I convinced myself, something about that window gnawed at me. It felt wrong, like it didn't belong. That first night, just as I began to drift into uneasy sleep, I heard it. I froze, my breath hitching. The sound was faint, deliberate, and unmistakably coming from the hallway, from that window. Clutching my phone like a lifeline, I crept out of bed and into the narrow hallway. My flashlight beam swept across the warped glass, catching smudges and streaks I hadn't noticed before. The tapping had stopped. The air felt thick, heavy, as though the hallway itself was holding its breath. I leaned closer, my reflection faint and distorted in the grimy surface. My pale face stared back, hollow-eyed and fragile under the sharp beam of my phone light. Then came the laugh. Low, rasping, and impossibly close. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. But the hallway was empty, silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. For the next few nights, the tapping continued. Always at 3:00 a.m., always the same slow, deliberate pattern. After a week, I couldn't take it anymore. I bought thick cardboard and duct tape and covered the window entirely, sealing it away like a wound I didn't want to see. But it didn't stop. The tapping continued, muffled now, but still rhythmic, still insistent. And then, on the 5th night, it changed. I shot upright in bed, my chest tight, every nerve in my body electrified with fear. The sound wasn't just knocking now, it was pounding, furious and violent, like something was trying to break through. I couldn't take it anymore. Fueled by adrenaline and anger, I grabbed a chair, marched into the hallway, and climbed up to face that cursed window. My breath fogged the cardboard slightly as I hesitated. In one sharp motion, I tore it all down. The glass was ice cold, colder than it should have been. My breath puffed white against its surface. And then, it moved. A face pushed against the glass from the other side. So close, the warped pane twisted its features into something grotesque. The skin was stretched thin and pale, veins spiderwebbing across its translucent surface. Its mouth was twisted into a grin that split its face almost ear to ear, revealing rows of sharp, uneven teeth. But the eyes, God, the eyes! They were empty pits of swirling black, pulling me in, making me feel like I was teetering on the edge of a bottomless void. I screamed and toppled backward off the chair, landing hard on the floor. By the time I dared to look up again, the face was gone. But smudges remained on the glass. Greasy handprints, too large and misshapen to be human. The next morning, I confronted the landlord. "There's something wrong with that window," I said, my voice trembling. His brows knitted together in confusion. "What window?" I led him to the hallway, to the spot where the window had been. Except, it wasn't there. The wall was smooth, blank plaster, painted the same dull beige as the rest of the hallway. The landlord tapped it gently. "See? Nothing there." I couldn't breathe. My head spun. I knew the window had been there. That night, I slept with every light in the apartment blazing. But at 3 a.m. the sound returned. Not from the hallway, from the bedroom closet. I stared at the closet door, my body frozen, my pulse thundering in my ears. The tapping continued, steady and patient, from within. With trembling hands, I lifted my phone and aimed the flashlight beam at the door. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. The tapping stopped, and then, slowly, the door creaked open just an inch. The smell hit me first, damp, rotten, like stagnant water and something long dead. A hand emerged from the darkness, its fingers impossibly long, slick and pale. They pressed against the door, leaving greasy smears. Then, from deep within the blackness, came a voice. It whispered my name.
"Emily, come closer."
My legs twitched, but instead of moving toward the voice, I stumbled backward until I hit the wall. I fumbled blindly along the wall until my hand found the light switch. With a sharp flick, the overhead light blazed to life. The hand was gone. The door was shut. But the greasy smudge marks remained. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed huddled on my bed, every light in the apartment blazing, my back pressed against the headboard. The tapping didn't come back, but I could feel something watching me, something hungry, just behind the veil of reality. The next day, I made the decision to get out of that apartment, at least for a few hours. I called my old friend Sam and practically begged him to meet me at a nearby diner. Sam was the type of guy who always seemed unfazed by life. He had a mop of curly hair, thick glasses, and a sarcastic smirk permanently etched onto his face. When I slid into the booth across from him, he raised an eyebrow. "You look like you've seen a ghost, or 10. I didn't laugh. "Sam, I'm not crazy, but something is seriously wrong with my apartment." He stirred his coffee lazily, watching me with mild concern. "What happened?" I told him everything. The window, the tapping, the face, and finally, the closet. As I spoke, his expression shifted from amused skepticism to quiet unease. "Dude," he said finally, his voice low. "You need to get out of there. Like, now. Sleep on my couch if you have to." I nodded. "Yeah, I was planning on it, but I need to grab some stuff first." Sam hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, I'll come with you. No way I'm letting you go back there alone." Back at the apartment, Sam followed me inside, looking around with wary curiosity. "Nice place," he muttered. "Smells like old socks and regret, though." I didn't respond. The hallway felt heavier somehow, like the air itself was resisting our presence. When we reached the bedroom, I froze. The closet door was ajar again. Just slightly, but enough to make my stomach twist. "You left that open?" Sam asked. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We both stared at the darkness beyond the door. The greasy smudges on the wood seemed fresher, like someone, or something, had touched it recently. "All right," Sam said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's deal with this. It's probably rats or something." Before I could stop him, he grabbed the closet door and yanked it open. There was nothing inside, just clothes hanging limply on wire hangers, a few old boxes stacked haphazardly, and the faint smell of mildew. But the shadows felt deeper, like they were swallowing the light from my phone flashlight. Sam turned back to me, smirking. "See? Nothing but..." Something grabbed him. A pale hand shot out from the darkness, wrapping impossibly long fingers around his ankle. Sam screamed, crashing to the floor as he was dragged halfway into the closet. "Help me!" he shrieked. I lunged forward, grabbing his wrists and pulling with all my strength. The thing in the closet pulled harder. I could hear something breathing in there, raspy, wet breaths, like air being dragged through a broken pipe. With one final yank, I managed to pull Sam free. We stumbled backward, crashing into the nightstand. Sam scrambled to his feet, panting, his face pale and drenched in sweat. The closet door slammed shut on its own. Neither of us moved for what felt like hours. Then Sam spoke, his voice trembling. "We need to leave, right now." We bolted from the apartment, not stopping until we were back in Sam's car, parked haphazardly down the street. Sam's hands were shaking as he tried to light a cigarette. What was that?" he stammered. I shook my head. "I don't know, but it's not done with me." That night I stayed at Sam's place, but at exactly 3 a.m. I woke up. It was faint but unmistakable, and it was coming from the guest room window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the window, my heart hammering in my chest. The tapping grew louder. Then slowly, something pressed against the glass from the outside. A face, pale and distorted, with those same swirling black pits where eyes should have been. It grinned, and then it whispered my name. This thing wasn't tied to the apartment. It was tied to me. Sam's guest room felt suffocating, the shadows in the corners stretching further than they should have under the dim light of a bedside lamp. The face on the other side of the window lingered for a moment longer, its grin stretching impossibly wide before it melted back into the night. The tapping stopped, replaced by silence, so thick it felt like it was pressing down on me. I didn't sleep that night, neither did Sam. He stayed in the living room, shotgun in hand, a weapon he had never fired in his life. Every creak, every faint gust of wind outside sent us both into rigid silence. "We need help," Sam said around dawn, his voice hollow. Real help. I nodded numbly. We spent the morning searching online, reaching out to every ghost hunter, paranormal expert, and occult enthusiast we could find. Most ignored us or offered vague advice about sage and salt, but one name kept popping up: Eleanor Graves, an independent paranormal investigator with a reputation for dealing with persistent entities. We found her website, an old HTML page with blurry photos and a contact number. Sam called her while I sat staring at the window, half expecting that face to reappear. "She'll meet us," Sam said, hanging up. "Tonight, at your apartment." When night fell, we met Eleanor outside my building. She was older, maybe in her 60s, but sharp-eyed and steady-handed. Her grey hair was tied back tightly, and her worn leather bag clinked softly with the sound of glass vials and metal tools. "You're marked," she said the moment she laid eyes on me. I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" "It means this thing isn't bound to a place. It's bound to you. And if we don't sever that connection tonight, it will drag you into whatever void it came from." Her words chilled me to the bone. We went inside. Eleanor unpacked her tools: salt, iron nails, candles, and a small handheld mirror etched with strange symbols. "Whatever you do," she said firmly, lighting the candles in a circle around us, "do not break this circle, and do not speak to it, no matter what it says." Sam and I nodded, sitting cross-legged inside the candle circle, as Eleanor began chanting softly in a language I didn't recognize. The apartment felt colder, the air sharp and heavy. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to ripple and stretch. Then came the tapping. Not from the window, not from the closet. This time, it came from inside the circle. My breath caught as I looked down. The floor in front of me had grown darker, like the wood itself was rotting and decaying in fast motion. A crack split open, a thin, jagged line of pure blackness. Something began to rise from it. That face, pale, grotesque, those endless black eyes and that nightmarish grin. Its head emerged first, followed by shoulders wrapped in what looked like tattered burial cloth. "Don't look at it!" Eleanor shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. But I couldn't look away. Its grin grew wider, impossibly so, until its cheeks split and dark liquid oozed from the tears in its flesh.
"You can't stop me,"
it whispered, its voice like dead leaves scraping over stone. The lights flickered. Eleanor threw something metallic into the crack, and a burst of white light filled the room. The creature screeched, a sound so piercing and raw it felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. But it wasn't enough. The crack was growing wider, the creature pulling itself further into our world. "We need to finish the ritual," Eleanor screamed. "You have to sever the connection." "How?" I shouted back. Eleanor's voice cracked with urgency. "You must reject it, deny it, tell it it's not welcome, force it out." The thing's twisted grin split wider, its hollow eyes locked onto mine as it clawed at the edges of the widening crack. Its long, skeletal fingers scraped against the floor, leaving deep gouges in the wood. Its voice slithered into my head, smooth and oily.
"You don't have to fight me. I can make it painless. I can make it quick. Just let go."
My vision blurred with tears as my body trembled, every instinct screaming at me to run, to give in, to stop fighting. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the crushing weight of terror, a flicker of defiance sparked. "You're not welcome here," I screamed, my voice breaking. "You don't belong here. Get out!" Eleanor chanted louder, her voice rising above the creature's ear-piercing screeches. Sam was clutching the iron nails and a small vial of salt, his knuckles white and face drenched in sweat. The creature lunged, its grin splitting its face almost in two, black ichor dripping from its teeth. Eleanor threw another vial into the crack. A burst of light erupted, illuminating the room with an otherworldly glow. The creature shrieked again, its form flickering like a dying flame. "The connection is breaking!" Eleanor cried. "Keep pushing it back!" "I don't want you here!" I yelled again, my voice raw, my heart hammering. "You're nothing! You have no power here!" The creature's form began to distort, its grin faltering. Its voice crackled, weaker now, less certain.
No, you're mine. You belong to me.
With one final, desperate motion, Eleanor slammed her etched mirror onto the crack in the floor. A deafening sound reverberated through the apartment, a mixture of shattering glass and a guttural, primal howl. The crack in the floor snapped shut, sealing with a sickening squelch. The air in the room grew still. The shadows stopped moving. The oppressive weight lifted, like a vice unclenching from around my chest. For a long moment, none of us moved. The silence was deafening. Eleanor finally broke it, her voice trembling but steady. "It's over. The connection is severed." Sam let out a sharp breath and slumped against the wall, his hands still shaking. I collapsed to my knees, my chest heaving as tears streamed down my face. But Eleanor wasn't done. She moved to the closet, muttering something under her breath. She placed iron nails along the doorframe and poured a thick line of salt across the threshold. "This place is still tainted," she said softly. "But the entity can no longer follow you. It's trapped here now, unable to latch onto you again." "Is it gone?" I managed to whisper. She shook her head slowly. "Not gone. Just locked away. But it can't hurt you anymore." I didn't argue. I didn't want to know if there was more to her answer. I moved out of that apartment the next day. I left almost everything behind: clothes, furniture, even my favourite books. Some things weren't worth the risk of bringing with me. Sam and I kept in touch, but we never talked about that night. Not really. Every once in a while I'd catch him staring off into space, his face pale and distant, like he could still hear the faint echo of tapping. As for Eleanor, I tried to thank her, to pay her back, but she simply shook her head and told me to live my life and never, ever look back. I followed her advice. I moved to a new city, a new state, somewhere far away from that cursed hallway and its impossible window. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up suddenly, my heart pounding, my ears straining in the silence. And every so often, I swear I hear it. Tap, tap, tap. Faint, distant, but there, waiting, watching, listening. And I wonder, did we really sever the connection? Or did it let me go, just to see how far I'd run